On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, what the ship is going on with all these tanker seizures. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. So, we've been going over a ton of waters and oceans that are being contested. Just the other day, did a whole video on the Black Sea. You can check it out. This video right here discusses it. You can get the link up there. This video really goes in some detail discussing what goes on between Ukraine and Russia and the latest regarding the Black Sea Grain Initiative. But what I want to talk about today is a series of actions undertaken by both the United States and Iranian governments to grab tankers and the problems associated with that and how this is escalating. So we're seeing an escalation in the Black Sea. We're also seeing one in the Persian Gulf. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this. So this is a story over in Maritime Executive based on a Wall Street Journal article. Texas lightering firms too scared of Iran to touch seized cargo. So back in April, the U.S. seized the tanker Suez Rajan. Now, let's be clear. Seizing it gives you the idea that Navy SEALs are fast roping down to it. That's not what happened here. Instead, the U.S. government pressured the owner and operator of this vessel to divert and sail their vessel not to Singapore, but to the United States, specifically off the coast of Texas is where they're at now. So now the ship it has sailed a 13,000-mile voyage from Singapore around the southern Cape of Good Hope of Africa, all the way to Houston, Texas. And the problem they have now is they can't offload the tanker because the tanker is so big, it is a massive VLCC, that it can't come into the port of Houston. It's restricted by draft. So what typically happens here is you take the fuel off the vessel to get the draft up. But no one wants to touch it because, again, the issue you see here is, I'm going to spell it out here for you. This is proving nearly impossible because all lightering operators have refused for two reasons, according to the Wall Street Journal and S&P Global. The first reason is fear that the shuttle's tanker's reputation will be tainted by its brief contact with Iranian cargo, even if that cargo is fully approved and authorized by the U.S. government. Quote, the stigma of having touched a sanctioned entity's crude will be carried forever in the eyes of the rest of the world, one ship owner told S&P Global. Oh, let me clutch my pearls on this one. We're going to be tainted by touching sanctioned oil. I don't buy that one for a reason. Number two, however, I buy entirely. The second is that any ship owner who lighters the cargo off will have to watch over their shoulder for Iranian reprisals. Iran has developed a reputation for aggressively harassing, boarding, and seizing foreign flag tankers in the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz, despite the extensive maritime security measures taken by the U.S. and its allies. The leading Gulf Coast lightering operators are global tanker companies, and they own ships that pass by Iran regularly. Quote, companies with any exposure whatsoever in the Persian Gulf are literally afraid to do it, one energy executive told the Wall Street Journal. Yes, I think that is the reason, much more than being tainted by this. And if you look at what this has done, you're seeing a cascade effect. So first off, here is Suez Rajan right now in the anchorage off Houston. You see it's far out there at the main anchorage, waiting for lighterage to come in. When you look at the details of Suez Rajan, you see that it's owned by Alma Maritime Incorporated. That is a Greek shipping firm. So the U.S. is exerting through the Greek government and pressure on the Greek shipping firm this diversion of the vessel and holding the vessel. I mean, this ship can sail wherever it wants to go, but obviously it's not. Either it's being held there by the U.S. government by force, or the owner is telling it to stay there and await disposition. This all led to a series of events that we've seen transpire this year. So take you through the history of this. This is an article from April of 2023. The U.S. confiscation of Iranian oil cargo preceded the seizure of the tanker Advantage Suite. So the Iranians seized a tanker. When the Iranians seized this tanker, the Iranian Suite, a Marshall Islands flag vessel, no one knew really that the Suez Rajan had been diverted, but that came out very clearly, or very quickly, I should say. And now what we see is this kind of back and forth. Now, Iran seized another tanker. This one was a Panamanian flag vessel, the Niobe, and they did this one a little bit differently. This vessel was coming out of a shipyard, so it didn't have oil on it. And the argument here was the ship was being arrested for charges. Now, ships fall under a very unique kind of aspect of law, under Admiralty law. Ships can be arrested. In other words, they can be, you can go before any court in the world and level charges against a vessel for payment. And if that vessel owes money in any way, or the company owns money, the ship can be made liable for it. And so the ships can be seized, arrested. And Iran has been doing that. They've actually been going into Iranian courts, arresting vessels, and then sending out the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or their Navy or Coast Guard to go seize vessels. So they're putting a kind of a veneer of legality to it, but then again, so is the U.S. government doing it. And so both sides are seizing tankers. Now, of course, they're not seizing Iranian tankers, they're not seizing U.S. tankers, because almost all tankers around the world are owned by these Greek shipping companies or these foreign shipping companies, and they're foreign registered with foreign merchant mariner crews. And what you get is this tit for tat. Matter of fact, just recently we saw in July, Iran seized another tanker. So this is a third one that they grabbed. And so we're just seeing this really escalating across the board. Now, this is not new. Go back to 2020. Yes, 2020, 3 years ago, when the U.S. seized 4 Iranian fuel cargoes that were heading to Venezuela. So 4 Liberian tankers were all diverted from their routes. The Bella, the Bering, the Pandy, and the Luna. They were all owned and operated by companies controlled by Greek-based firms, Vienna Limited and Palermo S.A. So the Justice Department basically argued that these ships were carrying illegal cargo. They were carrying Iranian oil going to Venezuela. Now, illegal is under U.S. law. This is a sanction that is in place about the Iranians shipping oil and selling it on the high seas and around the world. It is the U.S. that has these sanctions against Iran. And so the Iranians have been trying to sell this oil, and at times they run afoul of the United States. And this is exactly what happened in 2020. In 2022, again, we're seeing this happen. The U.S. seized another cargo, this time off the Greek islands. This was on a Russian-flagged oil tanker, the Lana. And there was a lot of debate back and forth about the Russian involvement in this and the Iranian involvement. Again, this was done in Greek waters with the cargo offloaded in Greek waters. This led to the seizure of 2 Greek tankers by the Iranians. And so we're just seeing that tankers are being caught in the middle of this. The U.S. is seizing tankers. The Iranians are seizing tankers. The Greeks seem to be the common factor here in that they own them all, because Greeks own all the tankers, basically. Not all of them, but they own a lot of them. And so they get themselves caught in the middle here, and they have to play off each other. They need the Iranians for oil, obviously. They got to sail right past Iran out of the Persian Gulf, whether they're getting the oil from Iran, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE, Iraq, wherever it's coming from. They got to deal with Iran on a common basis. And so you see these attacks being ratcheted up. And now you go into the modern day, and here's a story from early July. Reuters, U.S. said it prevented Iran from seizing another tanker in the Gulf. This time, the U.S. Navy intervened when the Iranian Navy was trying to stop. The U.S. destroyer, the McFall, arrived on station and helped defend a ship called the Richmond Voyager. This is a Bahamian-flagged vessel. Now, let's be clear. If you go back to the tanker war of the 1980s, the tanker war of the 1980s started in 1980. It was an offshoot of the Iran-Iraq war. Basically, Iran and Iraq started hurling missiles at tankers in the Gulf. The Iraqis would fire at missiles going to Iran. Iran would fire at ships going to Iraq. And these were largely neutral flag vessels, flags of convenience, open registries, and tankers were hit all the time. Crews were killed. This went on for 7 years, with really not a lot of involvement by anyone. I know everyone's going to go, wait a minute, Sal, U.S. escorted tankers. That was very late in the tanker war. Not until 1987, when the Kuwaitis reflagged tankers over to the U.S. registry. The U.S. would only defend U.S. flagged tankers. And this issue is interesting because here you have the McFall coming to the defense of a Bahamian registered flag. Now, a lot of people will tell you, well, this is what the U.S. should be doing. Freedom of the seas should be going to save these vessels. Others will say, well, no, they're not U.S. flagged. If they want U.S. protection from the U.S. Navy, fly the U.S. flag and be registered in the United States. But what we do know is that the U.S. is responding to this. The Pentagon announces, story by Mike Schuller, sending more forces to protect shipping against Iranian threats. We know that they're sending another Burke-class destroyer over to the Persian Gulf to reinforce the Fifth Fleet, F-35s, F-16 fighters, and including an entire Marine Expeditionary Unit is heading over. This is the statement by the U.S. Central Command, what they're doing about sending over an amphibious ready group and all those forces I talked about. And I just want to note here what they say in the second and last paragraph. In the past 2 years, Iran has attacked, seized, or attempted seizure of nearly 20 internationally flagged merchant vessels in the CENTCOM, Central Command, area of operations. Quote, U.S. Central Command is committed to defending freedom of navigation within our area of responsibility, which includes some of the most important waterways in the world. That's General Eric Kurilla, the commander of U.S. Central Command, goes on to say, these additional forces provide unique capabilities which, alongside our partners, nations in the region, further safeguard the free flow of international commerce and uphold the rules-based international order and deter Iranian destabilizing activities in the region. So the U.S. has announced it will go and defend these tankers. It's basically putting the line in the sand that we're going to defend these vessels transiting to and from the Persian Gulf through the Straits of Hormuz, which is part of freedom of the seas and something that the U.S. Navy has embraced throughout its history. It is unique that they will be defending ships that are not American flagged, which has been traditionally what they do. Whether it's American flagged ships during the tanker war at the end in 1987 and 1988, whether it's U.S. ships being seized by Somali pirates, this is Captain Phillips and Tom Hanks being grabbed, but now we're extending that out. But it's interesting to note that that's not the case when it comes to the Black Sea. In the video I had the other day, we talk about the fact that Ukraine has announced a new temporary sea route up to Ukraine that they're opening to escort vessels in. This is because of the end of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. That was the deal between Russia and Ukraine, brokered by the UN and Turkey, to free flow grain out of Ukraine to ensure that there is a ample supply of food in the world markets. What we have seen is Russia came out and issued a warning saying that any ships bound for Ukraine are going to be designated as carrying military cargo and therefore subject to attack. And then the next day they sat there and says, well, we have no plans to attack civilian ships in the Black Sea. So I don't know what the hell Russia is going to do. But then again, Russia, I don't think had any plans, quote unquote plans, to invade Ukraine either. And I find it interesting that here you have the U.S. Central Command announcing freedom of navigation. We're going to defend ships from Iranian attack. And then you have this is the Maritime Administration, the U.S. Maritime Administration's alert on the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov as a threat to commercial vessels. Russia announces it would suspend participation in the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Goes on here. This development could result in an increased threat to maritime traffic in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Goes on here, exercise extreme caution when transiting these areas. So the U.S. Maritime Administration, which oversees commercial shipping for the United States, including ships that are flagged in the U.S., but also ships that are owned and chartered by the United States, has issued this advisory. Yet the U.S. Navy has basically backed away from any proposal to protect these grain ships heading up to Ukraine. Now, obviously, there are unique features of the Black Sea that are not with the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz. You have to get through the Turkish Straits, which requires the approval of Turkey to get through. There is the fact that Russia is not Iran, and Russia has things like nuclear weapons and a pretty robust and coherent naval force and air force in and around the area, along with shore-based weapons. But again, you don't need naval forces riding shotgun to convoy. I mean, again, you can do this protection from shore. You can just say that the U.S. and NATO are providing this protection. Plus, you do have NATO nations that are in the Black Sea: Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. Turkey has a large navy that can do it, nowhere near as capable as the Russian forces are. But you can definitely see that happen. But again, you're seeing two different elements here where we've got these tanker seizures going on between the United States and Iran, where merchant ships and the crews are caught in the middle. And then up on the Black Sea, what we're seeing here is the end of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. There are no vessels up in the Gulf of Odessa right now heading up to Ukraine, whereas ships are freely flowing out of the Sea of Azov, across the Black Sea, out through the Turkish Straits for the Russians. And the question is, why is Central Command in the United States saying that we're not going to allow the Iranians to interdict trade, but we're allowing Russia to interdict trade in the Gulf of Odessa with neutral vessels? Are we recognizing that Russia has enforced a blockade around Ukraine, for example? Are we acknowledging that? Are we deferring that to them? This is an issue here because, again, this is two different messages that are being sent out around the world. And what does this tell, I don't know, a country like China when it comes to the Taiwan Strait, for example? So very interesting stories happening across the world's oceans this week. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Give it a thumbs up, share it across social media, leave a comment, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit that super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Until our next episode, Sal, signing off.